buzzing around his pulling his layers. Yes.
Then you joined your children today?
I went to a park in Shiur, which has like a bike track to go on.
You all took bikes with you?
Yeah. Yeah, it was good fun.
Oh, hello, Shiur. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. Sure.
Were you Antwerp or Amsterdam? Forgotten.
No, I've been in Antwerp, but I mean, I'm staying in Amsterdam.
Amsterdam.
Yeah.
That's very nice. What's it like in Amsterdam? What's the weather like?
Similar to there, a bit of rain, a bit of sun, bit of everything.
Is Amsterdam any mountains there?
No, completely flat.
And then there was the lakes.
A lot of canals and
Not canals. You go swimming? No, not really. You're not in canals.
no, not in canals. Yeah, you go swimming if I want to.
Is there beaches? Anybody know if there's beaches in Amsterdam?
Yeah,
Okay.
no, Amsterdam.
Not far from it.
Not Amsterdam, but
No, about an hour away. Yeah.
An hour. Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. So on Shabbos, we had the veil of the halachas of eating mitzvah, potem and mitzvah. We already moved on quite a bit. We're up to Daf Chavav Amud Aleph, Holchei Dvochim. 997. Oh wow. So yakish. Tanu Abanon. Holchei Dvochim. Tali, I saw a second. We'll give it 30 seconds for Tali. I'm sure. Let's get Anthony. Let's give someone here. I hope try to feel on the Chadash. Shopping was Sunday. So you went to a park. What did you do today? Did you do anything?
trimmed my bush. The bush is my hedge.
And you? Somewhere?
I have to do them eventually. They're going to start to be.
Probably more exercise than doing things.
I don't have an extension wire, so only half of it's done in my back. And to get on tomorrow.
That's okay. It's getting late. Tanu Rabban. Holchei Dvochim Bayoim. Those who travel during the day, P'tum and Succca Bayoim, apart from Succca during the day. Chayavim Balayla, because at night they're not traveling. Holchei Dvochim Balayla, P'tum and Succca Balayla. Chayavim Bayoim, they're obligated during the day. Holchei Dvochim Bayoim, Ubalayla, P'tum and Succca Bein Bayoim or Bein Balayla. If you're traveling day and night, you don't have to send the Succca by day and by night. Holchei Nedva Mitzvah. Those who go for Dvar Mitzvah, P'tum Bein Bayoim or Bein Balayla, they're always potter. On the Shabbos of Yom Tov, would go to Ishkelusa, have a gonu, they would sleep avaksa the Suah on the bank of the river Suah. Only they would say, Anon shluchim mitzvah anon, or shluchim mitzvah p'tuin no pata.
What if they would be hired to have to do sukkah with them? What would be the...
They'd have to look for a sukkah, they'd have to keep looking out for a sukkah. So if you look at the third thesis, just like it is normal that when you're living at home, you go on a journey, right? So Ben went to a park, Karaksh also went to a park somewhere. So it's normal. So therefore, and you don't think so too. Teresa says, just like the halach is Teshuv came to do, they should stay in your sukkah like you live at home. When you're at home, you sometimes travel. You don't take your house with you. Similarly, when you go on an outing, you're part of the sukkah. That is 100% clear that if you go on an outing in sukkah, you can eat out of the sukkah bread, you can sleep out of the sukkah. That is the halacha. Why don't you? Oh,
have a sukkah there.
There's a very harsh Igros Moshe Chuvas Gerushin Chaim Chelik Gimel, where he discusses the question: is there anything wrong in going on an outing and eating bread and sleeping if you have no reason to go on an outing? No reason whatsoever.
That's the reason.
So Moshe, as I mentioned, he himself holds that it's like a chila, one shouldn't go on an outing. He compares it a little bit, quite actually, more than a little bit, to someone who doesn't wear tzitzis. The halacha is you don't have to wear tzitzis. You're not absolutely obligated to wear tzitzis. If you wear four-cornered clothes, then you have to put on tzitzis. But if let's say it's a hot day, you don't put on tzitzis. And Teresa says in Menachos that if somebody doesn't wear tzitzis, he will be criticized. Why will he be criticized? Because you could have made yourself chayav tzitzis and you didn't. So Moshe, he sees that going on an outing is the same as somebody not bothering to exit. So it's true that you're potter because you're on a journey. Make yourself potter. It is very interesting. We've got now what's called a Shalas Teshuvas, Shalas Ish or something, from Yashiv. And he argues very, very, very strongly that it's absolutely fine to go on an outing. There's nothing wrong. It's nothing comparable to tzitzis. And you don't need it in Sukkah. He says you can't compare. He says at the end of the day, Chazal said Teshu came to do. This is not part of the mitzvah of Sukkah. You've got a Sukkah. You sleep in the Sukkah most of the time. The fact that now you're going out and outing is not at all a chisan.
Should you try?
Everybody agrees halachically not mechuyev. You're allowed to go on an outing. The question is, so that would depend on this. Moshe and Rabbi Yashiv. According to Moshe, yes. According to Rabbi Yashiv, not.
What's the difference in travel and you need to move to why do we say you don't have to move to travel?
Because like traveling, it's Tishu came to do. Just like when you travel, you don't take your home with you. If you went to the park today, so you probably ate supper in the park or lunch in the park. Why? Because that's the way a person lives. Similarly, a person's supposed to live at home. When you go travel, your sukkah becomes your home. When you're traveling, you don't bring your home with you. It's not like tefillin. Tefillin, the Torah never said you should put on tefillin only when you're at home. Teishu to do is a special patur. This is the way it is. It's a shame that I don't own the sefer, but he's got a lot of rayas of Yashiv. I saw it quoted in a few places. The Tishra Shmuel mentioned it, and there's a sefer called Mikdash Yisroel that mentions Shuvah. So this morning, Shamot Chavit, but the Maisa, he says there's nothing wrong whatsoever in an outings. There's no reason to stop yourself because that's the tzura of the mitzvah. That is his main line. The tzura of the way to keep the mitzvah is that when you're at home, you sit in the sukkah. When you're traveling, you're part. It comes from that. There are those who are more machmir, but here it's not like that. I remember I told you too many times before that when we were Perchim, we used to make this Perchim sukkahs. And one year I proudly came home to my father. And I said to my father, I built a sukkah. He said to me, did you make a bracha? So I said, yes, I should have sukkah. He said, you'd have been much better off not eating in the sukkah and not making a bracha levatolo, because the chances are that your bracha, the sukkah wasn't kosher. Because by the time we learn all the halachas thing, since the sukkah wasn't kosher, so your bracha was no good. But Shein Kain, had you eaten out of the sukkah, you'd have done nothing wrong. So this way, by sitting in the sukkah making a bracha, you made things worse for yourself. That deflated my balloon a bit.
So,
oh, it's halacha. You have to do the halacha as halacha.
If you go somewhere and the sukkah is there already, is there chiv for you to eat there?
Oh, yeah, yes. If you look at Tesis, look at Tesis. The chayavim balayla is 5 words in Tesis. That there's somebody who's traveling during the day has to sleep in the sukkah at night. Says Tesis, because adam non balayla b'yishuv. If you sleep at night in a place where in town in those days they used to have sukkahs, out of town nobody had a sukkah. Where would you have a town middle of a field? So it says that if you're going to be in town and there's a sukkah there, then you have to sleep in the sukkah. But it depends if you've got a sukkah available. If you're a guard, while you are a guard, you're part from the sukkah. If your job is to guard the city, you're part from the sukkah all the time. If you guard the orchard or guard the anything more in the last case, when you guard an orchard, you don't need to walk around the orchard. You just stay in one place. If you're going to be staying in the same place, and literally, why can't you build a sukkah where you're staying? At the end of the day, this is where you are. As Rabbi Omar Teshru came to do, meaning like this, that since when you live at home and you go out to guard, you don't take your home with you. So too, the Torah was never obligated you to make a sukkah. This is not your home. This is the place that you're guarding. So just like you said, it's like you go out of your home to guard, so you go out of the sukkah to guard. If you build a sukkah and you go in the sukkah, you're asking for trouble, because what will happen is the Ganav knows that you're now stuck in the sukkah. Since he knows you're stuck in the sukkah, therefore you're going to then cause Ganavim to come. If all you're guarding is one pile of fruit, and you can put your sukkah with the doorway opening up onto the pile of fruit, according to Rabbi, you'd be obligated to have a sukkah. Because there you can't say the logic of Pilsa Kur, a Ganav, that having a breach will call the Ganav in. Because there's no reason for the Ganav to come, because you're sitting right in front of it. Now, Shemekun Tabai is to be part from the sukkah. Chili Misham Shem says like this. It doesn't have to be a Chilish Shesh B'Sakona. That means even though the Gabi Shabbos, the halacha is that when we talk about a Chila, the Heta to be over and Issa is always by a Chilish Shesh B'Sakona. Regarding the sukkah, it's a chiddush she'ein bo sakana even. Afilu chosh be'inav, even if he's got pain in his eyes. Afilu chosh be'rosho, even if he's got a headache. It's a famous story about the Chayadam was Bavam Danzig. What happened was that he wasn't well one sukkahs, so he stepped out of the sukkah. Then what happened was one night he seemed dragging his stuff into the sukkah. He said to him, "Why?" He said, "Because I've got guests tonight." And the fact is, guests will be uncomfortable to sleep by themselves. And the halacha is that for Turin Sukkah, any pain, even a slight discomfort, patters you from Sukkah, because that's the halacha of Sukkah. But in Achnosas Orchim, in guests, then there's no Ptur. The Ptur is only an Oinas. I'm not an Oinas. I'm not up to the stage of Oinas. There's a different levels. For Sukkah, you need a much lower level. For Achnosas Orchim, you need a higher level. It says, I was once had an eye ache in Kazari. He let me and my people look after me out of the sukkah. Says the Gemara of Shora, Vav Shora Avach Bardala. He permitted Avach Bardala Migna Begilsa B'Sukkah to sleep in a curtain which has got a roof in the sukkah, which would mean that he's not actually sleeping in the sukkah. Mishum Boki. Because of flies or mosquitoes, machlokes and showing what boki are, flies. To sleep out of the sukkah, mishum Succca de gargishto. Rashi says gargishto is a kind of soil which some people put on the floor of the sukkah, and it smells very bad. So he said to him, since it smells bad, you can come out of the sukkah. This opens a huge Pandora's box, huge, because we've learned before, if you remember, we did it quite quickly, that you're not allowed to make a schach out of something that drips pieces. Why? Because if you drip, because it'll cause you to want to leave the sukkah. We don't allow you to make a sukkah lechatchila, which will cause you discomfort. So therefore, if that's the case, how could you allow him to sleep out of the sukkah because of Succca de gargish? They shouldn't have made the sukkah like that. There are three main answers in the Rishon, very briefly. One answer is that he was particularly fussy about smells. Most people, that smell did not disturb them. And therefore, it didn't matter. What? Hay fever would be a good example. Another essential Meiri says is that it doesn't usually smell until it gets wet. Once it gets wet, it smells. So therefore, they put it out, they're thinking that it won't rain in. Once it rained in, it smells, and therefore they go with it. Third explanation, which the Torah says, is that he was a guest. It's very similar to the first, but that he, as a guest, had no control about what they would build on the sukkah, and therefore for him it disturbed him. But they, the owners, they themselves, they were happy with it. So therefore, it depends. So therefore, since he was a guest, for him it disturbed, he was allowed to come out of the sukkah. It says, anybody who's in discomfort to the sukkah. Chayla is always a much higher level than mitzvah. And Mishnah doesn't say mitzvah, it says chayla. So what's the chayla and mitzvah? I mean, chayla hu mishamshav to him. Mitzvah hu patum mishamshav loy. If a person Hashem is not well, then even the people looking after him patum sukkah. If a person is mitzvah, he's part of it. The people looking after him are chayav, because they're not up to the level of the mitzvah because it's just a bit of discomfort. There's a Sefer Mikdash Yisroel. It's a very, very recent Sefer by a Rav in America, wrote out about 15, 20 svarim. And he said the following scenarios. What happens if you've not got enough space in the sukkah for everybody to sleep inside? Who do you cut off first? So obviously, under bar mitzvah, loses the chance for over mitzvah. But he says ancient svar that those who are married should leave the sukkah quicker than bachur, because most people are mitzvah when they don't sleep with their wives. So therefore, you could argue that the shtickle therefore they're potter. Bachur doesn't have that p'tur. So he says that if, it's a safe, halacha safe in this with the Shah. So first give the right to bochim, then married men, and then children under bar mitzvah. That's the order if you haven't got enough space in the sukkah. Says the sukkah, you steep so you can eat arach chutz the sukkah. The kama achilas I was achilas I. Mavis of tatu tasbei 2 or 3 eggs. Omla bav zim sagin sagin nishba ochi bav lesudas keva. Many times 2-3 eggs is a whole meal, and that should be enough. And Rabbi the toy bar beva by the kalo. The amount that person eats just before he goes to listen to a shiur. There's most Rishonim say that how much does a person eat before he goes to a shiur is enough for. Look, let's see what Rashi says. He's scared the shiur will go on for a long time. A mouthful. And this is how we paskin is that a mouthful is the amount that we're talking about bread, not fruit. If it's fruit, then of course you can take much, much more. If you look at the Tosfos Talti or Telas, the last 4 lines of Tosfos, the shiur zed dafke b'pas. This measures only in bread. The sukkah, the kemadiduk achilas ad pas. Eating 10 fruit is like eating a small amount of bread. So if you're only having a small amount of bread, less than a mouthful. Now the question is, how much exactly is a mouthful? It's a very difficult measure. Many of the Rishonim say it's the same size as 1 egg. 1 egg. 1 egg is approximately 2 kazaysim, which is approximately about 50 cc. So, for example, if you're having 1 Jack and Jill biscuit, you don't need to go into the sukkah. If you have 4 or 5 Jack and Jill biscuits, then you do. There's a halacha which the Mishnah quotes a very, very big chumrah every year. My sons get a bit of time with OCD about this. And that is like this, that the halacha that you can eat out of the sukkah, say a grape, an apple, 1 Jack and Jill biscuit, is because it's not part of a meal. It's not a meal. But let's say you're having a meal, proper meal, and you're eating potatoes, and your mother says, can you just get me something from the kitchen, get the jug of water, refill the jug of water. So while you're walking, you've got a bit of potato in your mouth which you're chewing. No, that has to be eaten in the sukkah. Why? Because it's part of the meal, and the meal has to be eaten in the sukkah. The Shmuel mentions halachas, it's not OCD, but it is something you should be very, very careful. Many times children they make sure to chew, eat everything, swallow it all down, and then you can get up and walk out to the sukkah to get something. Because even the smallest thing, at the end of the day, is part of the meal. If you're having just 1 potato out, it's not meal times 1. The hardest thing about sukkahs is like every time you have a piece of nash, your children all know about it because you sleep in the sukkah, you eat in the sukkah, they watch you 24/7. It is like, you can't have. Right, so that's the halacha.
Even not in the sukkah, they know.
Yeah, even not in the sukkah, they know. It's right.
Don't hide anything from them.
It's all to do with Teishvu Ken to do. Teishvu Ken to do means you sit in the sukkah like you would live. Just like, for example, if there was a wasp in your dining room, what would you do? Let's say you couldn't get rid of it. You'd go and sit in your lounge, right? Or you're going to go into your bedroom. So the halacha is that the Torah told you sit in the sukkah like you sit in your dining room. But if you move out to your dining room because of the wasp, so you can move out to the sukkah.
Okay, yeah. Did you just say about if you're eating a meal that you can't eat a potato out the sukkah?
If there's a wasp in the sukkah,
if you're eating the meal in the sukkah, you're saying everything within the meal, even a non-mazonos or hamotzi.
That's right. Everything has to be eaten in the sukkah. Everything, even the non-mazonos. That is a very big chumrah, and it's a halacha. It's brought down that if you're in the middle of a meal, even ice cream, for example, which is not thing, has to be eaten in the sukkah because it's part of the meal. Because the Torah never said Teishvu Ken to do with such a thing. It's a special drosha. The sukkah is Teishvu Shiva. So that is the mitzvah of sukkah. Yes.
You still have your mat.
Yes.
So why wouldn't you have your challah sukkah, first night sukkah, because you would on Pesach?
Because we actually will compare halacha of matzah to sukkah. We'll see shortly. What?
Why I said it.
Oh, very good. But the point is that each mitzvah has its halachas, its boundaries, how it's created. That mitzvah of sukkah is that you should sit in the sukkah like you sit at home. Just like the mitzvah is eating matzah. You can't eat, for example, apples and say that's the mitzvah eating matzah. The mitzvah is to eat matzah. The mitzvah of sitting in the sukkah is to sit in the sukkah like it is your home. And just like if you're traveling, you leave your home. So if you're potter from sukkah, if you're traveling, because that's not Teshu Ken to do. That is not the tzur of the mitzvah. It's not because the halacha is. I told you this once before. I absolutely was shocked. I used to travel reserve left every Friday, and what happened was a woman called them in, and she was doing a diet. It's called I think Atkinson's diet. Atkins diet, where you don't eat any carbohydrates. So she wanted to know, does she have to eat matzah? But I've heard that people like it. People like it. So she just have to eat matzah. And I was absolutely stunned. He said that if it causes huge distress, like chomish nechosov, so she doesn't have to eat matzah. But that's a different. That's got to do with all the mitzvahs. The oinus rachmana patri. This has nothing to do with sukkahs. Sukkahs has nothing to do with the oinus, that if you can't do it, you're not mechuyev to do it. By sukkah, the mitzvah is that you should live in the sukkah like you live at home. And for example, it's like the mitzvah of tzitzis is if you've got 4-cornered clothes, you should put on tzitzis. If you're wearing a non-4-cornered clothes and you put on tzitzis, it's no good.
At home, you would still do a mitzvah if you had a headache.
But would you stay there? What would you do if you have a headache? You go back into your bed?
You do the mitzvah and then you
No, because that's not the mitzvah. That's not the halacha of the mitzvah.
You said it's like being at home, and at home you would do the mitzvah.
No, take away the word mitzvah. At home, would you stay in the room if there was a wasp? No, you'd move out of the room. So too by sukkah, if you're scared of wasps.
The whole achilas arai that we have here, the Gemara only tells us an amount. Where do we get that it's only mazonos and not, shahakal?
The last 4 lines of that Tosfos, Tartius class, I read it too fast. The shiur's there. Tartius class, have you got the last 4 lines of that Tosfos? The shiur's there, dafka of a pass. The peri loy boy sukkah. The bas says, to pass. That means Tosfos says it. That avai is always by pass. That means 1 kibetza of bread. When it comes to fruit, you can eat a whole bowl of fruit without going into the sukkah. Okay. Says the word. You're not allowed to sleep shinas arei the sukkah. I have to remember this story like yesterday. I was walking here at Sefer, and I met with Dave Whitler, who I used to be very close to. Now it's very hard to. He said to me that what happened was he had set the time switch wrong in his sukkah, and the lights were on the entire night. And he couldn't sleep in the sukkah. I said, it's tired pot in the sukkah. He said, but what happened was he had put his wife in the bed, which he was going to sleep. Kids say he was stuck the whole night long, the bright light sukkah, and he was exhausted. He said to me, you know what my shayla is now? No, he said, I'm going to go to a shiur. I'm terrified I'll fall asleep because you're not allowed to sleep even shinas arei chutz the sukkah. What should I do? I'm allowed to go to hear a shiur if I'm going to fall asleep. It starts. I once mentioned that Gorn was thrown in prison for Tkufa. During Sukkah's time, he put matchsticks in his eyes that he shouldn't fall asleep out of the Sukkah because you're not even allowed to sleep temporarily out of the Sukkah. So it's a big shayla. I remember I've seen actually true. So are you allowed to go to a shiur on Sukkahs if your nature is to doze off? So it says my time. Obviously, this is not the get the dash shiur. Right, I'm actually should be wanting. The Gemara's got a question is, why is it that by eating, Chazal said an apple less than the kibetza of cake is okay out of the sukkah, but sleeping even for 3 minutes you can't? What's the difference? What's the difference between sleeping and eating? Says Rashi, the difference is that by sleeping you have less control, meaning that by sleeping, once you doze off, you don't really have the power to decide that you're not going to sleep longer. You might what? You could end up falling asleep for 3 hours. This happens when people goes off and doze off, and then a few hours later they say, "Why did nobody call me?" What happens is that a person can doze off and fall asleep for a long time. The halach is by tefillin, you're allowed to have a temporary sleep, but not a shinas keva. The same problem. How can you have a temporary sleep with tefillin? The more later we'll discuss what's the problem with sleeping with your tefillin on. The problem is that you should have so the Gemara says, Omar Rav Yosef that halacha that you're allowed to sleep with tefillin for a short time is only if you ask somebody else to watch over you. And then that would be the case by Sukkah according to Rav Ashi. If you tell somebody else to wake me up the minute I go to a deep sleep, it would be okay according to Rav Ashi. Because he holds the whole reason why a short sleep is forbidden is only because you might do a long sleep. And if you ask somebody else, your guarantor needs a guarantor. If you fall asleep, maybe he'll fall asleep, and then you'll all sleep. When are you allowed to sleep for a short time with your tefillin is you put your head between your knees, but you won't sleep for a long time. In Keva Leshena, sleeping is not a fixed thing. The way the Rishonim explain it, Rashi says it a little bit. The reason is that when you eat a little bit, there's a big difference in eating a little bit and eating a lot. In what way? That eating a proper amount satisfies, eating a little bit does not satisfy. And therefore, that's not considered part of living in the sukkah. Sleeping, there are some people that make do with just nodding off every so often. They never sleep properly. And therefore, since sleeping a little bit is satisfying, like sleeping a long time, so therefore Chazal said that all of it has to be done the sukkah. Great tzaddik, I mentioned from the Satmar Rebbe, after the second war, beyond the Satmar never went to bed. He would do whatever he needed to do, and every so often he would doze off for a minute or two, whenever he needed to. But the point is, there's a difference between eating a little bit, which is not satisfying, and therefore it's not part of the sukkah, and sleeping a little bit. And that's how we pass him, and therefore you can't sleep even a little bit. So, by the way, there's a famous Shagas Arya that asks a kasha, which he says is such a strong kasha that he doesn't understand. I know because I asked this kasha. The Shagas Arya asks that the Rosh holds you're never allowed to Mesiach Datim with tefillin. That means you always have to have your mind on tefillin all the time. So he asks, then how can you sleep even for a minute with tefillin? You can't think of your mind on tefillin. And from there, he argues with the Rosh, which is very strange. Shagas Arya only lived 200-300 years ago in Metz. And the Rosh lived 700-800 years ago in Germany. So it's big chiddush. He says, but for this Gemara, it's proved that when the Gemara says you mustn't switch off tefillin, the Gemara means you shouldn't do something which is the opposite of doing tefillin, like doing a joke, getting shikha, doing something which proactively takes your mind away from tefillin. But a neutral mind, a mind which is not for tefillin or against tefillin, is okay. What did he say? Sorry. Yes. So that's okay. But that's that way. He says it's survived from this Gemara, from the fact that the Gemara only we'll see that. Okay, why can't tell you chada? More now because a three-way contradiction regarding sleeping with tefillin. Yosh not with tefillin shenas av and shenas keva. You're allowed to have a temporary sleep, not a fixed sleep. Tanidach ben keva ben arai. You're allowed to sleep fixed or long sleep. Tanidach le keva ben arai. So another Beis says you're not allowed to sleep at all. No kasha. If you hold it in your hand, the tefillin, you shouldn't sleep even for a minute because you might drop them when you doze off. Those which are on your head, you're not allowed to sleep keva. The reason is because you might let off, Rashi says, might pass gas, and therefore by shinas avad, that's not going to happen. And the third one, the pois sudur lavei, where you're just sleeping and using them as like underneath your pillow. Many times, since people carry the tefillin all around, like the wallets, when you go to sleep, you're scared to get pinched. What do you do with it? You stick it underneath your pillow, so you shouldn't get pinched. That you're allowed to sleep properly. The amount of time it takes to walk 100 amas. So it's a very, very short time. 100. The halacha is it takes. We pass in generally that 2,000 amas takes 18 minutes. So 2,000 amas, a 20th of 18 minutes, is just under a minute, 50 seconds approximately. So we're talking about a temporary sleep is a sleep less than a minute that you're allowed to with your tefillin on your head. You're not allowed to with the tefillin in your hand. A person sees carry. Halacha is you have to take it off. You hold on to the strap. Right? So you don't hold on to the actual box. The box has got on it the name of Hashem. Since it's got the name of Hashem, you don't hold it until you've got your tevel. So you take it off only from the strap. Only 100 amas are no more. So now we've learned a little bit about sleeping in the sukkah. We learned a little bit about sleeping with tefillin, and now we're going to learn about sleeping in general. A person should never sleep in the day more than a horse sleeps. The amount that it takes to breathe in 60 times for a horse. Now the Mishnah discusses how long does it take for a horse to sleep, to breathe 60 times? Mishnah says there's many shittas, he brings a few shittas. Mishnah passes half an hour. And Mishnah says therefore one should not sleep for more than half an hour during the day. The Beis, the reason is because a bit of Torah. The Mishnah himself writes that on Shabbos, of course, it's a mitzvah to sleep, and one is supposed to sleep on Shabbos even more than half an hour. There's a letter in the Kreiner de Igvasa, that's by the Stipler. He says that those who learn better after sleeping are allowed to sleep in the day for more than half an hour. Omar Abai shouldn't say the sleeping of Rabbi, who was his Rebbe, Rabbi Nachmani, Kedevav. He learned it from Rav. Or the Rav could the Rebbe, but the Rebbe could the David, but David could the Succca. David learned it from a horse. Or the Succca Shit and Nishmi would only sleep 60 breaths. It's an amazing thing to think about that David HaMelech was rejected by his family. We once mentioned it, and he lived in the wild for years. Right, his brothers hated him, and what he did was he learned how to serve Hashem by watching how horses sleep. Instead of being dejected, here I am by myself. He thought about that horses manage on such little amounts. Horses barely sleep. If horses can barely sleep, so Kavachem serving Hashem should manage on less sleep. I mean, it's an amazing koyach to be put in such a situation and to grow from it. Abayav slept from the amount of time it takes to walk from Pudisi to Beikubi. So Rashi says, how long does it take to Pudisi to Beikubi? Because I don't know, I've never been to either of these places. So Rashi says, it's 6 parts. Now, the problem with this Rashi is that, first of all, there is no such Gemara, right? There's no such Gemara. Because Rashi says there's a Gemara elsewhere that tells us that Pudisi to Beikubi is 6 parts. There is no such Gemara. I wouldn't know such a thing. But there were other people like the Shash and others that point out there's no such Gemara. Another very big problem with this Rashi is that if it takes 6 parsa, the parsa is 4 mil. 24 mil is 24 times 18. Anybody know how 24 times 18 is? Come on, it's about 6 hours, I'm guessing. We worked out 24 times 18. 24 times 18. 18 is a third of that. It's about 8 hours. No, it's about 6 hours. Anybody want to work it out? Come on, do it very quickly. It's not so hard. Yeah, I'll go further.
135 minutes.
Come on, 24 times 18 equals 432 divided by 60. 7 hours. 7 hours. That means that Beis slept for 7 hours in the day. That's a terrible thing. Till now we've been talking about sleeping half an hour in the day that you shouldn't. And here Rashi says that he slept for 7 hours. So because of that, there were those, the Sfas Emes and others, the Magia, that it's not Shitta Parsi, but rather Shitta Ber Parsi, a 1/6 of a Parsi. A Parsi, we said, is 72 minutes. A 1/6 of a Parsi would be 12 minutes. So Abai once during the day slept for 12 minutes. That would be. Koile Rabbi Yosef was his Rebbe, and Mosai also Tishka, Mosai took Mishnoscha. How long does the lazy man sleep for? So that is what he was telling him off, either for sleeping for 7 hours or 12 minutes, depending on the Gilsa and Rashi. Person who sleep during the day, he can leave his tefillin on or take them off. If you go to sleep at night, Nosen holds you allowed to sleep with your tefillin on, but not during the day. So not during the night. That means he holds like this. The reason why you're not allowed to keep your tefillin on is because if you sleep at night, you're very likely to do tashmish with one's wife. And that's not covered for tefillin. During the day, one doesn't do tashmish. So therefore, he holds the holy Issa is tefillin during the day. Young people, they always sleep with the wives. And therefore, they're always busy with carrying and things like that. So therefore, they should always take their tefillin in. Does he hold that once you've Baal Keri, you're not allowed to wear tefillin? We've learned in brachas they're not allowed to daven wearing tefillin. Where did we see? They might come to Hergel Dovo, and the problem is they'll come to touch and be in places which is not good with the tefillin on. If a person has tashmish with his tefillin on, then he shouldn't touch anything actually until he washes his hands. Then he should take his tefillin off if they share damaskon. You're saying hands touch all over the place, and once they touch all over the place and they've touched dirty places, therefore one should wash his hands before. Okay, so that's some of the halachas of sleeping on this. It says Mishnah. Beis says a story. They came in to taste the tafsha. Is 2 dates with in a bucket of water. Take them up to the Succca. Why did they say halum? Take them up. The Succas were usually on the roof. Very good. They gave it to Tzaddik oichel fruit. Pochis v'kabetza, less than a kabetza. Not lebemapo. Took it off with he took it with a cloth. He ate it out of the Succca. He didn't bench. 3 colors of Tzaddik did. One is he didn't eat it in the sukkah. One is he never washed his hands. And another is he never benched. So the question is, if he didn't wash his hands, he obviously held that you don't need to wash your hands because less than the kabetza. If that's the case, so why did he hold the bread with a cloth? Neither. Why was he holding the cloth? So Rashi says he only held the hand with the cloth because since he didn't wash his hands, he was fussy, fastidious. And if he didn't want to touch it with dirty hands, the bread, nothing to do with the halacha, simply to do with technicalities. Tesis says this a few times. Chavam Beis top tesis that if Tzaddik was a kohen, since it was a kohen, it was very likely it was truma. And the halacha is a kohen is never allowed to touch truma, nothing to do with the mitzvah until it's got to be until Asadayim. Therefore, that's why he had to hold it with a cloth, and that's why. Now, let's examine the three halachas. The lesson of the kabetza, they ate it out of the sukkah. The three colors of the tzaddik. Ate it out of the sukkah. That's not such a chiddush. Why is that not such a chiddush? We just learned it. That we said added 2-3 eggs. Okay. The fact that it didn't bench, that is actually machlekes of men of Yehuda. There's a huge machlekes of men of Yehuda. Do you need to bench after kazais or after kabetza? And what happens is you've got this very, very, very long thesis. Now the whole thesis says that the halacha is that we paskin like the mayor, not like Rabbi Yehuda, right? Let's just say this a tiny bit. Rabbi Palik v'kezayis. V'nira the halacha kavosei. The halacha is like for a mayor that's a kezayis. That if you eat a kezayis, you have to bench. So it's machlekes of mayor, machlekes tanoim. It's machlekes who's showing him who we paskin like. Tesis is machmir that you have to bench after kezayis. And if you're interested, I won't forget this. I was once at a Succca. I was talking to Rob for a long time. So eventually I decided that for me, I've been talking for such a long time, I might as well eat something. I'm celiac, I can't eat cake. So there was a bunch of grapes. I took a grape off the bunch, made it eights, about put it in my mouth, and Rob went and grabbed off my grape with his fingernails, a tiny bit of the grape, and he dropped it on the table. Do you know why? So this is the taste of it. I was embarrassed. I didn't think of it myself. That he said to me, because you're going to have a major problem with Bocha Achroina. I saved you from a shayla in the Bocha Achroina. Look at tastes. Let me just sit to show it to us. I know. But he was concerned that I wouldn't want Tamor. It was quite a strong-minded Rav. I don't want to say what it is because I bet. But look at the Tusham. Look at this. No, because the question is, that I'd have to have eaten 6 or 8 grapes to be sure that I would. Okay.
He wanted all the grapes.
No. You save you. Look at this. Let's not taste this. You've got to look at this. You need to take a zayis. And we see how Tesis brings. What Tesis does, the whole Tesis is just to prove that Allah is like a mayor that you have to bench after kazayis, not after kabetza. You should just know that however many proofs Tesis brings for kazayis, that we show him the Rosh, and others say that you need to eat a kabetza, which is why if you're going to have Jack and Jill biscuits, or you're going to eat a slice of bread, don't eat between the kazayis and the kabetza. Because if you do, you're going to have a major shayla whether they should bench or not. Says to Yisroel, if you eat one seed of a pomegranate or one grape, you have to make a bocha achroina. So that's not so straightforward, because not if you agree with the Shabbos, therefore you've got to have a problem. So you should never eat one seed of one grape without taking a bit off or eating, as you say, a number of grapes. So it's tesis, means the whole tesis is to say that you need to eat that will pass like a man. Now, so we saw that 2 halachas. One is he never ate it in the sukkah. What did we say about that? That's not chiddush. We already learned that. The second thing is that he never benched. Well, that's a machlokas. He was mekel that you only need to bench when you eat a kabetza. The problem is he didn't wash before. And why didn't he wash before? There are many Rishonim that hold. You know why he didn't wash? Because he held that eating is a kabetza. And since he didn't eat a kabetza and he didn't bench, therefore he didn't need to wash. If that would be the case, since this long tesis says that tzaddik is wrong, and really he should have benched after kazais, so he should have also washed. So it comes out in Nafkin Mina, do you need to wash? And others say no. That there are 2 different questions over here. Question number 1 is, do you need to wash? Question number 2, the bench. Why should there be a difference? Because the halacha is that everybody agrees that tumah only spreads if it's the size of a kabetza. Right? There's a few times in Pesachim. Tumah only spreads if the size of a kabetza. For example, Let's say you go to a dead person's house and you pick up a slice of bread. That slice of bread is mamish tummy. Let's say you crumble it up, and I pick up one of the crumbs. Am I tummy? The halach is no. Everybody agrees tumah cannot spread if it's not a kibetza. Now, the reason we really wash is all got to do with tumah, that's the tumah of tumah. So if that's the case, this is a different question. It's nothing to do with the machlokes, whether you had to bench or not. It's a separate question. Do you need to wash for kibetza or not? That means there's a machlokes, do you need to bench for kazayis or kibetza? And there's a question, do you need to wash for kazayis or kibetza? And because of this reason, if you wash for a meal, you should eat a kibetza. Because otherwise, you made the bracha al netilas yadayim, it was a bracha levator. I have this many times in the winter. My daughters struggle with shalosh shudas. I always mention to them on Shabbos we did that anybody who eats 3 sudas on Shabbos, there's no nachla bli mitzon. I mentioned to you this before. I said to you, I once went to Rav's house on shalosh shudas time, and he said that he was telling his children, wash the shalosh shudas. One of his children said, I can't be bothered. So he said, what's the greatest fantasy you have? So I want to have a private swimming pool. You eat shalosh shudas, Hashem will give it to you. I said the person actually know the Rav a little bit. None of the children are private swimming pools that I'm aware of. But that's what I used to say to them. Now the problem is, for shalosh shudas, you only need to take a zayis. You only need to take a zayis. That's enough bread. The problem is that you need to wash because of the suffix. And once you wash, what are you going to do? If you make bracha netilas yadayim, then you have to eat a kibetza. So every shalosh shudas in the winter, I eat a kibetza. Yeah, it's only a slice of bread. It's not so hard. But as I say to you, there's a few different components of the Tzadik's Chiddush. Okay, a bit more. Let's get to this. Yes, take out before Shabbos. That's not so hard, except if you're struggling. And then what you have is the children say to you in the Succca that we're cheshish, it's not a kibetza, we made a leishev, and therefore for leishev, and therefore need to have more cake in order to be able to the leishev. That's right. You always have that shadow. Furthermore, my sister. It's a story which contradicts because the last Mishnah told us and here it's not. If you want to be machmir, less than Mishum Yuhar, there's no problem of Yuhar. Once I was zeichet to a shiur from a person, unfortunately I've forgotten the shiur, where he quoted all the places in Shulchan Aruch which it says the word Yuhar. You could probably do it by land nowadays. But basically you should just be aware that you're not allowed to be machmir on a halach which nobody else is, if people think you're showing off. Where does anybody know the famous place where the Shulchan Aruch says Yuhar? Binu Tam Tefillin. The Shulchan Aruch writes you're not allowed to put on a Binu Tam Tefillin. You're not allowed to. Why not? Because people think that you think yourself special. It's Yuhar. Except if everybody knows you as being one of the leaders of Anshe Ma'aseh. Can you imagine? That's what the Shulchan Aruch says about it. You see people with double tefillin. The Shulchan says no. But the other halachas. Oh, yeah. Some people are hiding. They do a bit of time tefillin in private. There's a famous story in the Shabbos. I never put up in the time tefillin. So they said to him, "But you're well known." So he said, "I'm hoping that when I come to Shabbat, and they'll say to you, why did you put up in the time tefillin?" And I'll say, "What do you mean? I wasn't worthy of it." They say, "What do you mean? Everybody knows the God that I do." And then they'll say to me that too. I say, "Oh, very good. So if I'm the God that I do, I'm fine." That's what he said. That's what I say such a story about him. Bring it up to the Succca. One egg, you need a Succca because the Tzaddik ate less than an egg. That's why it has to be a so we're limited to Rabbi. So both of Yisroel are wrong. The Beis said how much you need to eat in the Succca. Anybody remember? How much the Beis said we had it today? 2 or 3 eggs. Abaya said a mouthful, which you said is a whole egg. But Tzaddik, but that means even a whole egg. So even a whole egg, Abaya said is not. Only if you eat more than a whole egg, you need to go to the Succca. And here it's less than the egg you ate at the Succca. But if it's a whole egg, you chayiv. The reason the Mishnah mentions less than the Succca, less than the kibetza was only for the washing and the bracha. He said 3 colors. He never ate in the Succca, he never washed, he never benched. You don't know that the fact that it was less than the kibetza is to do with the fact of the Succca. Maybe the rest of the kibetza was to do with the benching, and had it been the kibetza, it was had to bench. But not necessarily would the kibetza be mechayim tit in the Succca. Maybe had he had less than 2 eggs, he would have washed on bench but not eaten in the sukkah. So the Maisa, we don't know from this Mishnah how much is it. What we do know from this Mishnah is that you have people like Gamliel, that they were very makpid, that even for 2 dates he went to eat in the sukkah. And you have people like Tzaddik that was eating bread out of the sukkah, to show you that it's not a guy to do one way and it's not a zuzah to do the other way. Okay, we'll stop over here. It's very, very interesting halachas, and it's not a. I struggle. I've told you about this before. That when you're eating biscuits, just today I went to the park. I took with a packet of biscuits, the special treat, whoever was bits. I took with this big packet. You know, they get 12 biscuits. They're massive. I don't eat biscuits. My children do. What are they called? They're big round ones. Lunches. It's a big. It's massive biscuit. Yeah, the cream in between. No, not individually.
That's similar. I know what you mean.
Anyway, so I gave one.
4A.
4A.
Yeah, 4A biscuits.
4A biscuits. So obviously, what did my son say? No, I need 2 for. I need no for. They make like a pizza. Yes, I need to have 2 for a pizza. We're up to the next Mishnah. Nice to see you. Unfortunately, tomorrow I don't know what will happen. Well, actually, we've got a day credit, but I don't.
Friday morning.
Okay, Friday morning. I don't know. Unfortunately, every day